Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Live broadcast. I'm Steve Altishan, Director of Client Partnerships here at Pacific Cascade Legal. And today I'm here with Conflict to Growth Navigator, Change Architect, and author Kat Stewart to talk about practicing smart conflict when navigating a family law case. Hey, good morning, Kate. How you doing?
I'm doing really good, Steve. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. Before we start in on this topic, which is fascinating, um, I want you to just maybe talk about yourself a little bit, and how you kind of got to working on this kind of stuff, because this is fascinating stuff.
Why do I voluntarily put myself in conflict? Yeah.
That's it.
Worked for a long time in corporate, like a long, long time. I mean, I entered the corporate world when I was still in my teens, and unfortunately, my conflict management skills were less than stellar. I think terrible would be a good term to use. And over the course of my career, they developed, and I learned a lot of things the hard way. And I did some good things though, but I learned a lot of things the hard way. And closer to the end of my corporate career, I ended up doing org dev and creating courses and information that would be helpful to my managers. And the most popular of those sessions was how to manage conflict in a workplace. So when I stepped out of corporate, knowing that conflict remains a mystery and how to manage healthy conflict remains a mystery to most
Yeah.
folks, I figured to take all the hard won lessons and apply that to conflict coaching, mediation, conflict education, and writing my first book.
I love it. I love it. This is great because the conference room to the divorce courthouse it's just a few steps, sometimes it feels like, in terms of conflict.
I agree with you.
And and really, I mean, folks going through, divorces, I mean, they often find themselves in overwhelming conflict. And whether they're married, separated, divorced, divorcing, the kids always react negatively to poorly managed conflict. That's one of the things we hear all of the time. And you know, how to keep this bad conflict at a minimum. And you've been working with folks, like you said, and wrote a book, and you call it, I love this word, smart conflict. So let's just start with, talking a little bit about how you came to develop it and how the smart conflict helps folks potentially in the situations of being in a divorce or, co-parenting conflict.
Their smart conflict actually started out as sort of the framework for the courses I've built and for the education I provide. So it was a way to formalize the concept into a really intellectual and easily digestible way to talk about a really emotional topic.
Yeah.
So really trying to put that into the framework. And in divorce and work, and I mean, where there are two people, you are going to have conflict. Period. End of sentence. Conflict is always relational. So when we talk about conflict in this context, we really have to pay attention to the relationships involved. And I love that you mentioned the children, that when you're in divorce, it's the relationship between you and your soon to be or ex-partner, and that's the relationship we can tend to focus on. But it's also the relationships around us, the extended families, the children, that are also going to have to evolve as this partnership dissolves. So yeah, in a nutshell.
I like that. I like that. So let's talk about, before we get into, and SMART stands for SMART, which I always love those. But before we get into like the individual letters, um, kind of a what kinds of things it can help solve. It's, I think at one point you said something like transforming disputes into growth opportunities. I mean, there's things that come out of it, that what are the goals coming out of or going into this system of conflict management?
Very much so. So I always equate conflict with creativity. As we sit here and evolve as two individuals together in this moment, be it a conflict moment, but we are two individuals evolving either for good or for ill, however that's going. We are creating something. So there's that creativity. And if we can keep our eye on that growth potential, what does this relationship look like after? How do I want to live my life after? What can I learn from this situation? What can we build out of this situation? How can we put our two ideas together to create something bigger and better and more profitable or fruitful for both of us?
I like that. And you use the word situation, which happens to be the S in smart contracts. So let's start with that. I think you put something next that was like, what is upsetting you? So the situation and how does that kind of fit into the smart conflict?
It's the foundational stone. What I've found through all the years of dealing with conflict and human resource and union grievances and in relationships and family relationships is a lot of folks walk into conflict not knowing what they're upset about.
Yeah.
They're coming and going, I'm just really angry, so I'm going to yell at Steve. That's it. Not knowing why I want to yell at Steve, not knowing why I'm angry. So really understanding the root of the situation comes into play. And I like to use the 5 whys. Well, I'm angry at Steve. Well, why is that? Well, Steve talked to me in a way that I'm not comfortable with. Well, why does that upset you? Because I feel X. And just go down those 5 whys to try and dig down to the root. A good example that comes up here is the story of the divorcing couple who's arguing over a slow cooker, the slow cooker they got on their wedding day. And it's a really knockdown, drag them out kind of fight. I want it, you want it, I want it, you want it. Who actually uses a slow cooker these days? I don't know. But this is the object that they chose.
Yep.
And when you dug down through these 5 whys, it was because the crock pot actually represented family dinners and the family that they were dissolving, that they would never be using it in the
Yep.
future. It was about that grief and loss associated with the dissolving of the unit, and not necessarily that I must have this crock pot. That came in. So really understanding that situation before you enter the room, before you enter that conflict is super important.
You once you kind of figure that out, is it is it something that you say, okay, that's bad, or that's good, or work it as more of a neutral and just try to figure out where to go from there?
So once you know what the situation is, it's a little bit easier to try and figure out where you want to go with it. If you're going in just to get the emotions off your chest and to feel better, where is that actually going?
Yeah.
Are you going to feel better forever? And is this really healthy for the relationship if you have to co-parent with this other individual? Is that going to be helpful? Is that how you want to live moving forward? So once you know the situation, it's a little bit easier to then kind of unpack the emotions that surround it, not labeling them as necessarily good or bad, but using those emotions as a signpost along the way, saying we need to pay attention to something.
Yeah. Um, the emotions that start to arise, how do you deal with those? That's one of the hardest things we have with our folks is these you're thinking of things and you're getting emotional and it sort of takes you over and then makes you not be able to do anything.
Absolutely. And that leads us very nicely into the M of smart conflict, which is measure your emotions. So when we look at the emotions and we think about emotions, emotions are like the pain receptors on our body. It tells us to pay attention to something. And just like we don't want to live in pain, so if we put our hand on a hot stove, you move your hand, right? The pain is telling you to do something. Emotions are the same way. I'm angry, I'm sad. Okay, so I'm sad. What do I need to do about this? This situation is making me sad. So how can I make that better? So that emotion is a signpost on the way. understandably, emotions can be big. They can be really tough to manage sometimes. So this is where that self-care and resiliency building comes into play. It's not your spouse, soon to be ex-spouse or spouse's
Yeah.
job to make you feel better. Um, how do you negotiate that? So is this talking it out with a neutral party, not going to his mom or not going to her best friend to say all the things that you have to say, but talking it out to a neutral party, a therapist or a friend who doesn't know your spouse or someone outside of the situation, so you can really get into why you're feeling the way you're feeling and how you want to move forward with that. For those of us who prefer to write things out and sort of get it all out, journaling or voice recordings or voice notes can sometimes be happy. I'm really angry today because of all of these things, and this is how I feel. Sometimes getting that out can be helpful. And I'm going to sound like your mother here, but mind, body, and heart care comes into place. So make sure
Yep.
you're engaging in exercise. You're getting as much sleep as you can in a tough situation. Make sure you're eating right, spending time on joyful things, things you enjoy. Do you like riding your bike? Do you like doing art? Make sure you're taking care of that heart, body, soul while you're moving through it as well, understanding that it is a process. It's not necessarily going to be, oh, my emotions are good because I journaled it out. It's that process. So you don't bring it into the conflict, and you can react or respond to the emotions in an effective way versus reacting to the anger and the heat in the moment.
I like that because it's almost, and I like the fact that you have different things because someone will say, well, this doesn't work. Yeah. But they're different things for different people. And it also, it's like if you don't do that, it feels like your emotion is like you're at 2 o'clock in the morning every night and waking up, and that's where you're stuck. But
Mhm.
these things can kind of help that, can't they? To, like you said, sort of almost rationalize and be able to deal with them.
And it's a way of processing. If you think of emotions as a wave on the ocean and you're the surfer, it's riding that wave, knowing it's scary and it can fall out from under you and you can fall off your board sometimes, but it's about riding that wave back into shore. That wave will not be there forever. And some of us can get really lost in the I'm going to be angry or I'm going to be sad forever. It's a wave. It will eventually end. And it's just how you stay on the boogie board, I guess.
Yeah. You know, everybody, everybody, me, um, just has this first reaction. And rarely is that the best one, but you say, okay, I'm not going to do this, and then you do it. It's hard to get out of that habitual reaction to something, isn't it?
Very much so. And we've been sort of conditioned to, I have this emotion, I have to deal with it now, right now, 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 now. Um, Pause button is not a bad thing. Hitting the pause button, saying, I'm really heated right now. I'm just going to go pour myself a cup of coffee and I'm going to be back in like 5 minutes. Just taking that moment to step out of the situation for a cup of coffee, a glass of water, a walk around the block can give you enough time to let that wave subside a little bit to ride the curl and come a little bit closer to shore. So immediate relief of emotions is not always necessary. Take that time to process it.
I like that. Can you think clearer if you do that? It just like it's not one thing is the only thing you can think about. I really like that. I don't know if you're ready for this, but agenda, I loved the term you used. You call it a mending agenda, not amending, like changing, but a mending agenda. And when you think about it that way, I really liked that term. And what are you trying to what do you mean by that? I mean, it is amending agenda.
When I say agenda, most people look at me and sort of tilt their head to the side going, agendas are bad. They're hidden things that are always, I never know about them and I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm being played. And, all of these things really come out when I say the word agenda. But you add the word mending before it, and it changes the context. My agenda here is not to get what I want from you at all costs. My agenda here is to mend our relationship moving forward, whatever that looks like. And if that means we never talk to each other again, so be it. But if we're raising children, we need to mend this relationship so we can move forward together to do that. So making sure you know what you want on the other end. And I'm not talking material things. It's not about the car. It's not about the house. It's not about the bank accounts. It's about, what does this look like on the other side? What does the relationship look like with this other individual? What does this relationship look like with your children? You know, what do you want that to be? So making sure you know how you want to see this in the future gives you context in the moment. So if you're looking forward saying, I really want it to look like this, and in the moment, you're like, well, they just said something that really upset me. It's a little bit easier to say, but if I open my mouth now and say what I want to say, just to get the emotional relief, am I going to meet my agenda goals? Another unique feature of the agenda is that you share it with the other person.
Yeah.
It's not hidden. It's not hiding it. It's, I really want our relationship to look like this at the end. This is what I'm working towards. What's your agenda?
And
And it gives that opportunity. Sorry.
yeah, yeah, and that's what I like. You catch them back. It gives the opportunity to listen and to make the agenda. A lot of times it's just something that, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that you just slog through, and you just, the goal is just to get through the agenda, and it doesn't focus like you do on what you want to solve. It's all about making it, right, or making it better, which isn't just about you. And so I like how you bring the other person in. This is kind of where the other person sort of joins the smart. At least that's the way I kind of felt. And now it's there's two people there working together.
Exactly. And conflict is relational. You wouldn't be in conflict if you didn't
Yep.
have another person there with you.
Yep. Yep. How do you how do you agree to something without feeling you've lost something? You know what I mean? It's like sometimes, it's you're resolving conflict, but do you just you don't give away the farm? I mean, and that's not what you're trying to say in terms of this. But there's a real kind of a fine line there.
Very much so. I was talking to someone the other day and I gave them my definition of conflict as relational, and we're looking for forward momentum. And the first thing they said was, well, you're missing the aggressiveness of conflict. And I'm like, if you're aggressive, you're doing it wrong. You're in unhealthy conflict at that point.
Right.
I'm talking healthy conflict here. So with healthy conflict, you have to know what your boundaries are. And when I say boundaries, I don't mean concrete walls topped with razor wire. I'm talking like living hedges between you
Right.
and other people that are going to grow and evolve with you. So these are the things that I'm willing to negotiate on, but I really can't do this. For example, you want to move to New York. I really can't move to New York. My entire family is in Kansas. I can't do that. This is a no-go for me. But, we can arrange flights for the kids to go back and forth every 6 months. You get them 6 months, I get them 6 months, because I can't leave. But it gives us a spot to where we can start with that boundary to move forward. So I'm not giving up my family relations to move to New York, and you're not giving up your dreams in New York to stay here with me in Kansas. We're finding a way forward. But you need to know what those boundaries are beforehand, and you need to know which ones are drop dead boundaries, which ones are the razor wire top walls, and which ones can grow and evolve.
Yeah. And sitting down to do that intentionally it really helps. Like you said, when you kind of get control of your emotion, this all sort of locks the puzzle together.
Very much so. And you are connecting your emotions to that agenda as well. I need my family. This is an emotional connection I require. So it takes the emotion, puts it with my boundaries so that I now know where I stand so that I can effectively negotiate. And a lot of folks, when they're coming into conflict, don't have this. which is why there's, well, you're asking me to move to New York. Oh my gosh, I can't move to New York. And then the brain kind of clicks over and goes, oh my gosh, if I move to New York, all these terrible things are going to happen.
Yeah.
So it creates that anxiousness and that anxiety along with it that you weren't really prepared for. So if you can get it out in advance and draw those lines, it definitely helps.
Yeah. And you mentioned several times, conflict is relational. And so that's why I like the R in your smart. And it's about relationship. And what you call future focused relationship. It's because you can get caught in a relationship thinking that can never change.
It, the definition of unhealthy conflict is a conflict with no momentum. You get stuck in the moment.
Yeah.
She did this, he did that, she did this, he did that. We're stuck in this moment and unable to move forward. Yes, they did that and they did that. It is your fact. It is your fact. But where do we want to be now that all of this has happened next week? So taking that relationship and projecting it into the future gives you something to move towards so you don't get stuck in unhealthy conflict.
Yeah. I love that. And what can we do to keep our attention on the future? It's so easy to get, you're doing it to get it pulled back, but it's really important to try to, isn't it, to keep that attention on the future in the midst of all of this.
Very much so. So the first thing I would suggest is use your emotions as a trigger for reflection. Why is this upsetting me so much in the moment? What is this trying to tell me? As opposed to getting lost in it and saying something you may regret. Don't let the emotion take over. So using that emotion as a point for reflection. We talked about pausing already. That can give you
Yeah.
that space and time you need to reflect a little bit. And when you're in the height of the emotion in the moment, think about yourself in the future and how you want to feel in the future. Is venting whatever emotion you're feeling now going to bring peace to your future self? Forget about the partner for a minute. Is this going to bring peace to your future self as you move forward? Is being right now worth giving up peace of mind next year?
Yeah. That's so important. Work with clients so much on that. I want this. I want this now. I want this little thing. And forgetting, okay, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, you got to sit with that other adult on the bench watching your kids, you know, in the play or in a game. So that's, you got to, like I said, look forward. You also talk about prioritizing relationships, and I think that was fascinating. What do you mean by prioritize? It's not like I like my mom more than my dad.
It's prioritizing the relationships more than the event. It's prioritizing the relationships more than the house, more than the bank account, more than the boat, more than whatever. Because when it comes right down to it, it's the relationships that carry you through life. So prioritize the relationships over other things. If we're looking at this in an employment environment, you need to prioritize working with Jimmy over, making sure Jimmy doesn't get the promotion over me. Because
Yeah.
you got to work with this guy next week. And it's very much the same. You said it, you're going to sit on the bench watching the game with this parent for X number of years in the future, perhaps forever.
Yeah.
At least you're forever.
Really?
You've really got to prioritize that. How do you want that to feel? And how do you want your children to see you? Do you want them to see you snipping back and forth at one another or unable to sit on the same bleacher? You've got to sit on opposite ends because you just can't stand the sight of each other. How is how do you prioritize that now so it's good later?
And the later, at least in my mind, when I was reading the thing, yeah, kind of flows to that time and place. It's about now and it's about not now. And what do what do you kind of mean? Because you say time and place to optimize your outcome. So is it like it's there's a right time and a wrong time to act?
Very much so, and it's very situational dependent. What I like to kind of throw in here is, I think never go to bed angry. You know, that advice you get, never go to bed angry, I think has ended more marriages than it has actually saved. If you don't, if you don't have the emotional capacity to talk about something really heated right now, forcing me to stay awake when I am tired to have an emotional conversation with you is not going to end well for
Yeah.
either of us.
Yep.
It's okay to hit pause as long as you come back to that conversation when you're both ready. It's like asking the boss for a raise right before you have to tell the board of directors you have a deficit this year. You don't ask for a raise then because the outlook is probably not so great on the outcome. You know, it's about
Yeah.
optimizing that or making your point or trying to get people on your side and having that argument you really wish you had with your partner last year at the family reunion. You now have an audience. You both have your egos on the line. Your reputations are at play here. Everybody's watching. Who's on whose side? This is not the best place for a conflict. You're
No.
not going to get a good outcome, and the relationship, the future of the relationship, will be negatively impacted in that instance. So, really considering when and how you bring things up is important.
Yep. Yep. I know of clients who, while they've dropped their kid off and they're closing the door says, "Oh, I want this." It's like, really now? We have to talk about this? Kind of, I get that. But it means not just keeping the status quo and kind of delaying, you know, your action.
This is not about conflict avoidance. This is not about put it on the shelf and forget it and just shove your emotions deep, deep down inside. This is about acknowledging that it's there and you do need to have this difficult conversation, but you don't necessarily have to have it right now, and you don't necessarily have to have it in front of an audience.
Yeah. Oh,
It
yeah.
you it's intentionality of it.
I like that. We are just busting through to 30 minutes, but one of the things that you know we do a lot is talk in laws, the factors involved that a judge considers for this. Um, so we're used to hearing, what factors should I consider when determining the right time and the right place?
There's two sides to this. There's your side and then there's their side.
Yeah.
Are you emotionally ready and able to have this conversation? Do you have enough time to have this conversation right now? You're not dropping off the kid and running out the door.
Yeah.
Do you have enough time? Uh, does the other person have the emotional capacity to deal with it right now? So here's this empathy piece.
Yeah.
It's not just about whether or not you're ready. I'm ready to have this conversation right now, gosh darn it, and you're going to have it. If I'm not ready for it, again, the outcome's not going to be great. I'm not going to be able to respond to you the way in you probably need me to, and the way I best represent myself. So again, watch if you need an audience. Do you really need to do it at the family reunion? Do you need a lawyer present? Is this a safety thing? Do you feel more comfortable with having a third party there just to help keep things a little calmer so that you know you can push that pause button? All of these things come into play. And is having, my lawyer there going to trigger my partner? Is that going to need their lawyer there? Is this going to be you
Yeah.
really have to consider what you need and what they need and find that perfect time and place when you both have the reserves and you're able to move forward.
I like that. And I like that you've through all of this smart conflict, you've included the other side because a lot of conflict training seems to be all about this is what you're going to do and you do that and this is for you, just regardless of what's going on with the other person.
Much so, as a conflict educator myself, I find a lot of programs do focus on resolution. Say this to get this response. Say that to get that response. It's very narrow and very concentrated on the flashpoint. I
Yeah.
like to think of conflict in three phases. The first one is mitigation. What can I do right now to stop conflicts from jumping up in the future? How can I manage my relationship now to stop those flashpoints? Then you come to the resolution part. How do I resolve this conflict in the moment? And then the part that most people forget is the third part, which is restitution or restoration. How do I restore balance in this relationship? How do I restore health in this relationship after the conflict is over? So there's two other parts on either, one on either side of conflict resolution that you do have to consider, and it's all relationship based.
Yeah, yeah. That is a nugget right there. The idea that it's both. You're not just resolving your conflict, you're resolving their conflict. I mean, and then you change your relationship that way. I love that. I love that. Well, before we go, I do want to give you time to say something about and help someone with if they want to get a hold of you. How would they do that?
The easiest and best way to get a hold of me is through my website, which is www.smartconflictbook.com. You can see all my articles there. You can email me from there. You can book a consultation with me there. So best place is that. You can also hook up with me on LinkedIn.
I love it. I love it. And thank you, having said that, for joining us today. I mean, the insight that you gave was clear, navigable, and understandable. And those make it really valuable. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. Really
Oh,
appreciate it.
I loved it. I also want to thank everyone else who tuned in today for joining us. If anyone has any questions on today's topic, you can actually post it here, and we can also get you connected with Kat. And until next time, everyone, stay safe, stay happy,